This is talkSPORT. We are the two mics on the warm-up. There's been one massive story in the world of football over the last 12 hours or so, possibly longer. Kelvin MacKenzie is suspended from The Sun currently because of a column that he wrote in the newspaper. He has said this about Ross Barkley and Everton. The reality is, talking about Ross Barkley going into a nightclub, that at £60,000 a week and being both thick and single, he is an attractive catch in the Liverpool area, where the only men with similar pay packets are drug dealers and therefore not at nightclubs, as they are often guests of Her Majesty, meaning that they're often in prison.
Yeah.
Now, you and I both know Kelvin MacKenzie. He was once associated with this very radio station. You'd like to address some of the things that he said.
Well, I think it's so grossly unfair. I know columnists in newspapers and News UK, who own The Sun, in which Mr MacKenzie wrote his column, and also who own this radio station, talkSPORT, issued a statement. They said the views expressed by Kelvin MacKenzie about the people of Liverpool were wrong, unfunny, and are not the view of the paper. And I'd really like to endorse that, because I am not a person from Liverpool. I'm not what you'd call a Scouser. I come from Chester, but I've supported Everton all my life, and therefore go to Liverpool on a regular basis. And, for instance, you know, the reality is that at £60,000 a week and both thick and single, talking about a young footballer who's made his way in life, to me it kind of illustrates a sort of malice towards young working class men who've not had the benefit of a great education, but who have excelled in a particular skill they have in life. And it's almost like an envy of people like that shouldn't be allowed to succeed to that level. You know, that's what it said to me. That's what came to me. And then also to tar the community from which Ross Barkley comes from in such a gratuitously offensive way, to say these things about, you know, the only other people in his £60 a week drug dealers, they won't be around, they're in jail. Horrible and needlessly offensive to a community which is known for its very, very self-identity, its culture, and, can I say, its success over the years. Now, I go to Goodison Park and I sit in rather a nice lounge, right? And so to say that people in Liverpool are associated with these sort of really horrible and...
Well, it's a stereotype from a very long time ago, isn't it?
Well, I don't think it's a stereotype from any period. I don't think it's true of Liverpool at all. And what I'm going to say is that I sit in a lounge, and, for instance, I sat next to a chap there last week when Everton beat Leicester 4-2, who runs a very, very successful leisure business, in which he was telling me the problems they're going to encounter with the new pound coin, because it's a different shape, it goes into machines, they've got to work out how much it's going to cost them, will they get compensation? The room was full of businessmen, local businessmen from Merseyside and North Wales, who've made good. There are builders there are developers. Liverpool is a thriving...
We did a very successful show at the O2 Academy in Liverpool last November.
A very successful show, and you know, the people there were lovely. We didn't meet any people who looked like they were low-life. They didn't meet people who looked like...
any more than you would if you went to parts of London, or parts of Manchester, or parts of Reading.
I know, but what I'm saying is we didn't. You know, it's not that we avoided them or anything. We didn't. And I just thought it was terribly gratuitously nasty.
The tone of the
and
piece.
Unnecessary.
I mean, you and I were both talking about Ross Barkley and what happened in the nightclub the other night on our own show, right? And there's any number of ways of being critical of Ross Barkley for being in a nightclub in the first place and for letting himself get into that sort of situation. But I agree with you that it was needlessly personalised and nasty, and it didn't need to be.
And the assumption also is it's bad news to make these assumptions and then put them in print, because when you do it in a newspaper column, it is a one-way form of communication. You are bluntly stating something you think about another person. Now, if you've met that person and you've met them continuously and you know about them, that's fair enough. But when Mr MacKenzie writes, perhaps unfairly, I've always judged Ross Barkley as one of our dimmest footballers. There is something about the lack of reflection in his eyes which makes me certain not only are the lights not on, there's definitely nobody at home. Has Mr MacKenzie ever met Ross Barkley?
I suspect not.
I have been watching Ross Barkley play football and following Everton for years, but I saw Ross Barkley make his debut against QPR on the opening day of a season about 5 years ago. Everton lost 1-0 actually, and it wasn't a great debut. But I've never met Ross Barkley. I've never spoken to him. Of course, I've seen him in interviews after the games when he's looked exhausted and he's looked a bit bewildered at being asked questions. He's not a professional communicator. But to make that assumption and say, always judge Ross Barkley as one of our dimmest footballers, horrendous.
Yes.
So horrible. And
I mean,
then to reflect that the society in which he was brought up and lives in is similarly afflicted
Yes.
is shocking.
Well, Kelvin MacKenzie's employers have taken that view, and that's why he's been suspended. Now, what happens next is anybody's guess. We have no idea what will happen, whether he gets reinstated, whether he gets fired. We don't know. All I can tell you is that I had a series of exchanges on Twitter last night and this morning with an awful lot of people who were accusing me of siding with Kelvin MacKenzie, which I was not doing. I was making it clear that, unfortunately, we live in a democracy. Sometimes people write things in newspapers that we don't like. Now, there are laws against libel. There are laws against slander. It may well be that Ross Barkley will consult solicitors about what has been said about him, and he might even sue Kelvin MacKenzie. But the point is, I was defending the right of Kelvin MacKenzie to write these things. Not just him, but whoever it is. And I think people should not make the mistake of thinking that I'm in support of him, because I'm not. What I am in support of is the right of anyone, if they are writing a newspaper column, to write what they want to write. And if they write something which is wrong, they have to correct it. If they write something which is legally dodgy, they will be sued and, possibly fired. And he is currently facing the consequences of what he said, which is entirely correct.
Well, I saw you communicating with people on Twitter last night, and again, I realised exactly what you were doing. You were expressing the view that, lose freedom of speech and we lost the society we live in. I accept that.
Because nobody can agree what it is that they want to see in a paper.
No.
You can't allow people to say, I don't want that in, but I want this in.
No, I, however, did not get involved, and I did not get involved for a number of reasons. One is that, again, when you put words in print, it's a one-way communication. I preferred to do it today, and then, whatever response we get, we'll get. And secondly, that historically, with Mr. MacKenzie, I choose not to get involved in any sort of situation which might involve contact with him, even the second or third hand.
Sure, absolutely right. So that is the situation. I mean, that is where we stand on it. We don't speak for talkSPORT. We do not speak for anybody other than the two mics and our own particular view of the world. And people have been saying things on Twitter as well, like, why is nobody mentioning this? Well, we're mentioning it, and that's what we believe.
Indeed we do.
Indeed. So let's move on to more matters of import.